welcome to another great prospect podcast. I have myself here and Coach DePascal with great guest on today, Coach Connor Lugo, who is the defensive line coach at Salisbury University. Um, we're really excited to talk to him about some D line play, some recruiting. Coach started out as a grad assistant there. I think he was before he was a grad assistant. I think he did some time handling the equipment, and then he's kind of moved his way up to becoming the defensive line coach. So it's pretty cool what he's doing. All at Salisbury. He's a Salisbury grad as well. Without further ado, welcome, Coach, to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Love being part of the channel, but one of the things that's been really great for me is, the opportunities that Salisbury has. And I'm really excited to kind of share what my passion is here at Salisbury, but also kind of inspire some of the younger kids coming up through the ranks. It's definitely a place to be.
And this is the place that you played at and you're now coaching at, and you went to grad school at. And so you really have some great recent history there. So pretty cool stuff. Talk about Salisbury. Talk about yourself as a player, and talk about what made you get into coaching.
So for me, I was a kind of a late bloomer when it came to football. So I went to Notre Dame High School in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, and that's when I kind of first started coaching and kind of learning about things. But when I first started there, got into the freshman team. That was when Coach Chappie Moore was still the head coach of Notre Dame. One of the greats. And so I was on his team and was starting to learn about football. And then as I got older, Coach Mark Lordi, he was there my senior year. So he was the one that really got me into thinking about college football. And, my first kind of offer experience was from TCNJ with Coach Casey Goff. Now he's at St. Vincent. And, that was kind of the first thing of, hey, like I could possibly play college football. And, eventually, Coach AJ Johnson and Coach Doug Fleetwood, they contacted me at Salisbury, and it kind of went from there. One of the greatest things, for me was I wanted to, kind of leave the state of New Jersey. I kind of wanted to go out and explore a little bit. And Salisbury, I felt like was the place where it was far enough away where I didn't have mom and dad knocking on my door saying, "Hey, Connor, come on, 8 a.m., come, we get to class." But I could, go back and, if I wanted, someone else to do my laundry or get a home cooked meal, I can do that. It's a nice drive away. But, that was kind of my first, instinct. When I first came to Salisbury, I was just kind of blown away with the resources and the facilities that were here. And, the playing style that I kind of really enjoyed is, the offense we run here is the spread option. So, I coach the defensive line now, but as a player, I was a center here. So for me, again, I was a bit of a physical kid as a youngster, and now I'm sort of, kind of lean back a little bit. But for the most part, I really like getting after it. I like getting after running the ball. I like, setting the tone early, being physical. And, the offense that we ran, definitely was kind of toward my, strong suit. And, when I got here, I had a ton of great guys, ahead of me that were not only just, great, friends and people, but great mentors. That was one of the things that I think going over my last few years as a player, Salisbury is different in the fact that, yes, you come in and you're always competing for your starting spot, but, the guys that are there, they're great mentors. They usually take their guys under their wing. That was kind of my thing. I had a guy who was a, all region player ahead of me, and, I got to learn under him for 2 years. And then the system, how it goes is you kind of learn for 2 years, you learn for a year and a half, and then you get to play. But, Coach Doug Fleetwood, who's, by far one of the best offensive line coaches in not only Division III, but college football of itself. I mean, he has numerous All-Americans on the offensive line. He was one of the first real guys in my recruiting process that really kept it, kind of, as the kids say now, 100%. The kids are real. Right. Nowadays, you get a lot of these coaches, you say, hey, coach, hey, Connor, I really want you on my team. I think you're a plug-and-play kind of guy. I think you're a day-one starter. And as for me, it's like, that's great to hear, but that's not realistic. I mean, coming into college, I was 18 years old, and I remember my first practice, and I'm going up against grown men. They're 22, 23. These are real dudes, and the closer you are to the ball, it's definitely harder to play. And so for me, when I met Coach Doug Fleetwood, I came down to Salisbury. He was like, Connor, I see you, as a fit for our system, but as a starter day one, Probably not. And we have a guy that's just coming off an all-region bid. And, again, it's good for you because you have an opportunity to learn from him for 2 years. And then eventually you take the next step, you become the starter. And that was kind of the thing where I was like, oh, I'm not the greatest thing since sliced bread. Like what? Like that's such
right. You figure out real quick. There's a lot of other dudes in college that are like it, right?
Yeah, I mean that was the one thing, especially with Division III. It has the kind of annotation of, hey, it's a club sport, right? Well, no, in some Division III schools, it's a real thing. And again, these guys take it super serious. And again, one of the nice things about being a Salisbury is that it is 100% a real sport and is a real thing. Salisbury takes its athletics super serious. It doesn't matter if it's football, lacrosse, baseball. Salisbury is really good at a lot of its sports. But meeting the staff for the first time, I mean, that was another thing. I know, especially when I was getting into college, a bunch of coaches bouncing around. They kind of stay there for 2 years and they're gone or looking for opportunities. Salisbury, when I first met Coach Sherman Wood and Coach Rob DeSpennett, I met them, and the fun thing was, all right, at the time, when I was 18, they had been together as a staff. The core four of the staff had been together for 18 years. Now that I'm here and I've been here, the staff has been together for 20 plus years, which is unbelievable to think across any division, right? And
unheard of. Yeah, it's unheard of.
Mm-hmm. And, when you got, Coach Sherman Wood, who's the all-time, winner at Salisbury University, he's an SU alum. Played defensive back here, was an All-American. You have Coach Rob DeSpennett, who was an SU alum here. Guys that bleed what we call maroon and gold, right? So guys that, they don't want to leave, right? They know what the aspirations of this program are. And, when I got in, they kind of mentored me a little bit. We call it the two-hand program where they guide you for your first 2 years, right? When you're finding out how to get through college, especially as a first semester freshman, right? You're thinking of, oh, I have so much free time. I can do everything I want, right? Most of the time, a lot of these freshmen will just end up sleeping through class. So got to be careful of that. But, my experience at Salisbury has been nothing but great. I was able to learn my first 2 years, and then my junior year was COVID. So, that was kind of the new thing, right? So nobody knew what we were doing, but I was able to, kind of counter that with, hey, we're practicing every day, we're working out, we got bigger, faster, stronger. And then that, my junior year when we actually started playing and, we went up against some of the top teams of the nation, that was one of my favorite years, played with a lot of great players, and, kind of continued on for my, 3 years of playing essentially. And, because I was able to use my COVID senior year, my 5th year. And, it's been a roller coaster, ups and downs, but it's been amazing. And to be honest, I wouldn't change it for the world. I think that was one of the things that when my senior year, I got interviewed by NJ.com and the Trentonian, and, talking with them, and, I go back to all my experiences in my past, and it's like, my family, my mom and my dad, they really let me kind of choose where I wanted to go to college. I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity where I can kind of pick, and it was down to, a few schools like a TCNJ or, a Salisbury. And, going back to it, I always say, if I had to go through that situation again, I'd probably make it, 10 times out of 10 that I'd pick Salisbury. Just the people that were here, the resources and the opportunity. And again, I've had a lot of fun here, and it's the same reason why I'm still here, right, after all these years.
Right. Because I'm sure you've had some opportunities to do other things and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and kind of the thing with me was after I was done playing as an offensive lineman, I wanted to stay around, and I wanted to coach with Coach Fleetwood, because obviously who wouldn't want to coach with the best? But we had some coaching changes going around, and kind of a couple weeks before camp, my first year coaching, they asked me, it's like, hey, you want to take over the defensive line? And I was like, well, I got no idea how to play defensive line, but I sure know, that I have to figure it out. And, took some long days. I was lucky to get with Coach Queese McCrae. He's actually one of the head coaches at Kennedy High School now in Maryland. And, he did a great job with me. He was one of the guys that really kind of helped me with the basics of, coaching our system, but also just being a defensive line coach. A different type of mentality. Usually you got to add a little bit more juice and a little bit more hype to your practices if you're going to be a defensive line coach. But, he's been great. And, Coach Rob DeSpennett, who runs our defense, one of the best. He was a quarterback here, all-time leading passer. And, again, kind of having that kind of resource to go back to kind of dip into the well has been nothing but awesome. And the last 2.5 years, when I got the position, we kind of had a younger group. We didn't have a single senior my first year. So we were dealing with young kids, inexperienced. And then this past year, it's hard to say that we had a subpar season because we did so well. We went to the Elite Eight, but I'm sure you talk to any of the guys on the team, we could have done so much better. There's things that we always can get, work on. But to have our, starting D-line, all three guys make all conference and one of them be all region, that's one of the best things that I could have asked for, especially those guys. They work their tails off. And again, they come to practice ready to go. And, Coach D gets us right, especially with the game plan and what we try to do, especially, for us, because of the kind of the offense we run and the defense we run, we're all about the certain type of athletes. We want to get athletes on the field as possible, right? So whether we're running spread option on the offense or we're running our 3-4 on defense, we want as many kids on the field as possible that give great effort and they're tough, right? You can't teach some of those things. But that's some of the stuff we can hone in on, and definitely, that's one of the things that we definitely love out of the kids that we recruit.
It's awesome.
Absolutely. Talk about what the appeal is in Salisbury and what you were attracted to and what you try to get recruits to understand. I know you kind of went in the whole thing about your own experience, but what is it that you guys are trying to track there at Salisbury?
Well, obviously we have a criteria of certain types of kids. Obviously we're a high academic school, so trying to get kids with good grades. But the one thing that really drew me was, again, going back to, everyone has this stigma of Division III is a club sport, right? It's not taken serious, right? Well, when I came to campus at Salisbury and I did all my visits, one of the things that Salisbury stood out was they take their academics super serious, and their athletics just as serious. Again, for me, on some of the visits I went to, it's, hey, some of these kids, you have to do your own laundry. Hey, you don't even have your own locker room. Hey, you're, got to do this, you got to do that. Where at Salisbury, we have our own equipment manager that takes care of your laundry. So you have that D1 experience. And again, for me, right, I know that, as a player, I wanted certain things, from my coaches, my coaching staff, some of the players that I was able to meet. And I think just the resources that Salisbury provided. You talk about, some of the best resources academically. The Purdue School of Business, which I'm an alumni of, almost 2 times over, for my business, undergrad and my master's degree. But for there, one of the top, business schools in the country, one of the top libraries in the country. So for me, I felt like, one, I was going to get, kind of top-notch, resources academically so I can succeed after college. But also I was going to be able to play at a high level and have the support of an athletic department that really, really just wants to be great. And that's one of the things that was really nice and that draws me. And I know that for, a lot of kids, it's something that they got to look into, like, hey, my senior year, I knew nothing about Salisbury until they knocked on my door, right? I remember,
right.
What is a Salisbury? I remember my first game day visit I actually went to was for TCNJ and Coach Goff. And, I'm talking to him before the game, and they just so happened to play in Salisbury, and I talked to him, and Coach Goff was a great guy. I really have a lot of respect for him. He was awesome and kind of really helped me get into a lot of the coaching stuff that I'm into now, especially with how he kind of recruited me and his process and how his beliefs kind of go into a lot of his coaching stuff. But for me, I remember I met him and he was like, yeah, we're playing Salisbury University down in Salisbury, Maryland, and they're the Seagulls. And I was like, Seagulls? That's like, usually you think of, college mascot, you're thinking of something strong like a lion or a tiger or a bear, right? Well, the Seagulls, they're pretty mighty too. They're pretty ferocious, and they went out and they had a pretty good game that game. But, for me, it's the lore of, whenever I'm going to do something, I want to do it 110%, right? And Salisbury does that. And that was one of the kind of things, and the resources that they provided was second to none.
No doubt about it. It's interesting place. It's on the beach there, right? It's near the beach, I should say. Mm-hmm. And that makes it into a pretty cool place to be able to go to college. The spread option you guys run there has had a lot of success. Talk about the philosophy of running the spread option, why it's been a difference maker for you guys, and what type of players you need in that offense.
Well, for us, again, it doesn't matter if it's offense or defense, but offensively, we love having athletes. That's one of the best things that we've been able to kind of contribute. You get a bunch of guys, especially, some schools, it depends on who you're talking about, but they're all fixated on, hey, what's the height and the weight of the kid, right? What's his makeup? What's his frame looking like? For us, we take a lot of in-between kids where it's, hey, you might have a guy that's, who plays, as a slot receiver, right? But he also can play running back, but he's also maybe 5'7", 5'8", right? So not the typical size of your college running back. We'll take him, we'll use him as one of our slots, and he'll go out and have probably like 125 yards, 2 touchdowns, whether it's passing or receiving. For us, we want to get athletes on the field. We want to get athletes in space, right? So the spread option for us does really well. We spread everybody out. We make people think a lot. And, Coach Ryan Fleetwood, one of the best offensive coordinators in Division III, if not college football, he does a great job of coordinating everything and making people think. But also with our offense, it makes people think, but also we have a lot of solutions to problems that people try to give us, right? So whether you're trying to bring a safety down to, increase your run defense, right? Well, then we'll throw it over the top. We want to create explosive plays, and that's what our offense does. This past year we had a great season. We had Gage Katzenall, who's a South Brunswick kid. He started off the season for us at quarterback, and he led us through some of, probably the toughest games we've had in a while, playing Muhlenberg, Johns Hopkins, Washington, and Lee. Some really tough games, and he led us through that undefeated. Unfortunately, he went down with an injury, so our backup Cyrus McGowan came in, and he just ran the offense to perfection. He's a Queen Anne's County kid, and for us, getting some of those local kids, but also filling in some of those gaps with those Jersey kids is kind of where we see a lot of the growth. But those guys, they ran the offense to perfection, and we were able to get some great production. One of the fastest guys on our team, but not only in Division III, is this guy Dario Belzar. I definitely think you guys should look up his name. He's one of the fastest guys in all of Division III, and he puts he's one of our slots, and he puts people on attention. And when he gets the ball, it's kind of hey, you take 1 second off him, he's gone. So that's one of the nice things about our offense. We get the ball to our playmakers. And again, we take a lot of those tweener guys that people will pass over, right? Even at the offensive line, right? When you think of college offensive linemen, you're probably thinking of some of those 6'5" guys, 6'6", right? Well, for us, right, for me, I was not, the 6'6" guy. I was not the prototypical offensive lineman coming out of high school. I'm 5'10", right, like everyone else says. And so for me, being able to play the center position, Coach Doug Fleetwood, he has a lot of kind of characteristics of what he wants, not only out of his interior guys, but out of his tackles. And again, out of the interior and kind of the overall offensive line in general, you got to be physical. That's one of the things. Yeah, you can be 6'6", but if you're, if you're not going to be able to strike somebody, that's somebody we really don't want. We'll take the kid that's 5'11", that's nasty, that wants to get after it, that's willing to work hard, that's willing to, go out and compete every day. We'll take that kid 9 times out of 10, right? For us, we want to make sure that we get the right people in the system. Because, again, we want our tackles. Our tackles got to be just as athletic as some of these, skill guys. They got to be able to run out on toss. They got to be able to block linebackers and safeties, second-level stuff. So, and then, obviously, they got to be strong enough to hold up in the pass game. Because when we throw it, we want big touchdowns, explosive plays in the interior. We want some dogs. That's what we want. We want guys that are going to get after it, physical guys, not going to be scared of anything. Again, in the NJAC conference when we play, some of these nose guards,
right,
big guys.
Yeah.
They are huge. We talk about when I played, we had, some competition with some guys like William Patterson, Kane, Rowan, TCMJ. These guys, they're legit. There's, some of those guys are 6'2", 6'3", and they're 300 plus pounds. So you got to be able to move somebody vertical. And, for us, you got to have that right mindset. And, Coach Fleetwood, he definitely sets the tone, with his offensive line group, and, they do a really great job. And this past year, Trey Price, who was one of All-Americans, he got nominated 5 different times, whether it was the AP, the AFCA, all these different places. And, he was kind of the stalwart, but also, Tony Mason, who was a guy that, luckily I was able to play with him, Trey, Dusty Crody. These guys were all All-Americans last year, and they did a great job. I mean, to have 3+ All-Americans, including Chris Clark, our center last year, kind of just, says it all. We were able to average 42.5 points. Went into the playoffs, went to the Elite Eight, which was the first time since 2019 I was on that team, and again, that was unbelievable run these guys had. They worked so hard, and that's kind of been our motto the last few years.
Cool. Yeah, it's been very successful. Salisbury's had a lot of success. Talk about D-line. What's your philosophy? What are you trying to recruit? What kind of guys do you need in your room?
For me, I mean, obviously, you got to have good talent. I mean, for the most part, where there's a lot of criteria. But again, I want an athlete, right? It's all well and dandy if you're 6'6" and you're 385 pounds, you can just clog the middle, right? But if you can't move, right? If you're not physical, right? I don't want you. I'll take a guy that's a little bit shorter that can run well, that's physical. And the difference between what we kind of want in our defensive linemen is, we ask a lot of them because again, we're not asking them to drop in the coverage, but we're asking them to move a ton, whether it's any of our slants or any of our blitzes. Right, we're definitely kind of exotic in a lot of the blitzes that we do. Coach Suspender usually likes to draw up some stuff, whether it's out of our base 3-4, any of kind of our stutter stag stuff. But for me in particular, when I watch film, right, everyone coaches will always say, "Hey, great effort. Kid has great effort. Hey, he's good effort." Right, but I want shocking effort. I want to be like, "Oh my God, like, I gotta have that kid." Like you see him chase down that guy. Like I want something that's gonna be just something that stands out. And I think for us, we want kids that are tough, right? Because you got to be able to stop the run in our defense, right? We're going to stop the run, so we got to have tough kids, right? And then you got to be able to, control the pass, right? With a lot of these, new passing concepts, you're kind of just maintaining, you're trying to keep everything under wraps and keep it in the bubble, but we got to be able to stop the run, control the pass, and get after the quarterback. And with kids nowadays, you get a lot of kids that are lengthy, and for us, we've been blessed. I mean, for us, last year, I think if you took a look at the weights of our starting defensive line, you'd be like, are you sure these guys aren't linebackers? I mean,
Right.
Our starting defensive line last year, I think, our two ends were just under 220 pounds, and our starting nose guard was 240 pounds, right? And again, all those guys were all conference. Our nose guard, Frankie Giannetti, who's actually going to be the assistant defensive line coach this year, which has been awesome to have him on the staff. He was our all-region player, and he was a monster. But for us, what we ask our guys is we're going to ask our guys to move a ton, right? And they got to be strong, and they got to play technically sound. That was the one thing that really helped us this year, playing technically sound. Learning from Coach Fleetwood, I know it's from the ground up, starting with your steps and your hands, right? So making sure that everything works well and making sure that, you not only know what you're doing, but why you're doing it. Right? Why are you going into the B gap? Why are you going to the A gap? Well, it's probably because we're going and sending a blitz into the B gap or the C gap, right? So making sure you're in the right spot at the right time. So, again, and not being selfish, right? Sacks, all that stuff will come if you do everything properly, right? So making sure we're playing gap sound football, and making sure that, we're making it easier for the linebackers, right? My thing as an offensive lineman, my goal was, hey, make sure my running backs look good so I can, block and everything. And as the defensive line, right, that's essentially what we're doing. We're trying to take up as many bodies as we can so it frees up the athletes behind us so they can go make plays, TFLs. I take a look at, our playoff game against Randolph-Macon. For years, I had always been, looking at some of these D3, football, stats of some of these games where, some of these teams had like 7+ sacks in a game. I was like, oh my gosh, like I would kill for a game like that for us, for our guys. And we had never had that, and then we go into that game, and the defensive line set the tone. Frankie, and Savion, and Chase, and those guys really went after it, and they were one of those. It was one of those groups where you didn't want to pull it off, but like, hey, you kind of had to give some other guys reps so that they can kind of get into the game too. But for them, they were a great group, and I'm excited to have Chase back. He's going to be back. We have a bunch of guys returning that got a lot of action last year, and to have Coach Giannetti on the staff now. Another New Jersey guy, it's going to be another great opportunity for us. And that's been the nice thing, kind of dipping into some of the Jersey things, I think has been kind of the thing that's really propelled us further, especially because we play in the conference. I mean, I think we had like 5 or 6 guys when I came in that were from New Jersey. Going into this upcoming season, we have about 12, with, additions like Nick Medina out of Holy Spirit, Jake out of West Milford, some of those guys like Ack out of Toms River South, some of these guys that are, that have seen us,
stud.
But just studs. I mean, that's what we want.
Well, I think a lot of the appeal, right, because there is so many Division III programs in Jersey, So for some of these guys that are higher level D3 guys, like for them to now go to Salisbury is an appeal because, like you said, it's away, but it's not away. And it's also within the NJAC conference. So there's still, mom and dad are still getting to see them play multiple times a year, whether they're traveling or not. And like you said, Salisbury isn't that far away. I knew when I was at Montclair State, we played Salisbury, and Brian Westbrook's brother was on the roster, Byron, and he was an absolute stud. And for us to go down there and then play them again on a home and home, like as an out of conference, was a little different, but it wasn't that big of a travel issue in terms of, having to do an overnight or something like that. And it's just always been a pretty renowned program in terms of, coach has been there for a really long time, and you don't see, coaches do that anymore, stay home in one spot for that long. And especially to that extent, where you're talking a lot of years. And I'm sure coach has had some opportunities to go elsewhere, yet he chooses to stay where he's at and kind of do his thing. So to see guys kind of dip into, because I'm looking at your roster, as I go through here, and you see it's mostly, a lot of Maryland guys, it's Delaware guys, like the kind of local area. But to see you now start to get into, Jersey, I think that is an appeal to kind of go away and yet still play in the NJAC conference. And then especially coming off the years you had where, you're in the playoffs and you're making noise and stuff like that. I think that adds a level of, another place for these guys to go. And it's solid football where, you're going to go there and you're going to win more games than you're probably going to lose, so that's an appeal, especially in nowadays where, guys just want to, I want to go to the highest level, or, I want to go here and then I'm going to transfer up. Talk about that a little bit. Has like the transfer portal, guys leaving, any of that stuff touched your rosters in terms of that yet, or maybe not so much because it's only because you're at the level that you're at?
Well, for us, it's kind of we've had some success, but we've also had some misses. I mean, it all depends. The transfer portal thing is kind of it's a blurred line for sure. It's definitely in the gray. I think for us, we try to do our best to kind of mitigate kind of having a ton of guys come in, because again, a lot of times, and it's no fault of their own. I mean, sometimes you get a kid that comes from a D1 program and they have all these high expectations, and they get here, right, and they're not they're not as good as they think they are. So they come down and they come to us and they really want to play, and then they might not be as successful, and for them it's kind of heart-wrenching because they always thought like, hey, like I was this D1 guy and now I can't even play at D3. But for us, it's always about finding the right fit. Guys that want to come here, we were successful last year because we had two guys that came in that were transfers. And it was a kid named Sherman Hatton who came from Slippery Rock, and he was actually a preferred walk-on at Marshall. And then we had a kid named Cyrus McGowan who was our quarterback the second half of the season. He came from Lincoln, and he was one of those guys that in years past, we usually didn't have a ton of success in the transfer portal. Maybe we bring in 5 or 6 guys, and then maybe one of those guys would turn out pretty well. But for the most part, by the time those guys would get here, they were kind of just broken. They kind of wanted to explore their other options. And they just,
it happens.
It's hard.
No doubt about it. That's always going to be, in today's era, you're going to have guys that'll leave, and that's just how it is. I
think the academic standards too, right, Dave? Right? Like the academic standards. So, I mean, like even if guys want to get out, why would you get out when you're at those you have that academic foundation, right? Just not play. You know what I'm saying? So I think that adds a little bit to it as well.
And for us, I mean, it's not like, I know in the Division I level, like Clemson doesn't bring in, they don't bring in a lot of transfers. They don't bring in any transfers. But for us, the one thing that we see out of our guys that either, they come in, right, either they, don't want to play football anymore. We usually don't have a lot of guys that transfer out that go on to play somewhere else because the academics and the resources here are so well. Guys that, again, they get in here, you know, maybe it's not what they think, right? A lot of the guys, they have the, you know, unforeseen expectations of what Division III will be, right? So the guys that stop, a lot of times they stay around because the academics are so well endowed here. And, you know, again, make sure that, we bring in the right guys. You kind of got to have a good mix. But the transfer portal is kind of one of the things it's hard. I mean, it's not like, where I can talk to, I can go on, a coach's huddle and, take a look at his roster, right? Well, my transfer portal updates that I get are from an email that have an Excel spreadsheet that have where the kid was at, what high school he played at, how many years of eligibility, and then I got to do the work on if the kid even wants to go up, if he's trying to go down. So it's a ton of work. For us, it doesn't usually end up working out well, but the guys that it has worked out for have been great for us. And that's usually what we try to do. We try to, we're all about the quality of the guys. So again, bringing in 5 or 6 guys that we think can make an impact, whether it's on special teams or on offense and defense, that's kind of our thing. And we'd rather bring in 5 or 6 guys than bring in 20 guys and try to, battle out positions, and they got to learn stuff. It's hard. It's definitely hard.
What is your roster limits at Salisbury? What do you guys have?
So per the NJAC, our roster limit's 125 guys. And so for us, I kind of feel like that's like the perfect number, because any lower and you're kind of running low on depth and really thin, but any
it's
more
tight.
You like, what am I going to do with 30 guys at a position? Like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to conduct practice? Right. So 125 is kind of the perfect amount where you can have, enough depth to kind of definitely get you through the season, but also you're going to have, you're going to be able to teach the guys that are younger, right? You can bring them up a little bit easier.
No doubt about it. No, that makes a big difference. As far as like where do you recruit? What's your area? And talk about like how you go in and meet with like what does you do when you're on the trail?
So the one thing that in this last couple of years we've been successful with New Jersey is the fact that some of our assistant coaches are from New Jersey, so it really helps to know like what schools to attack. And for me, I recruit mainly Mercer County because that's where I grew up, Monmouth County. I recruit Salem County, Cumberland County, Cape May, and I go all the way up as Morris and some of Union and Bergen, depending on the schools. But for us, again, we want to plug in guys, and we kind of cherry pick it, right? Where we want, the best guys out of New Jersey, so that again, it doesn't matter if it's, helping out us, but we want to make sure we're filling in gaps that we can't get out of maybe the state of Maryland or the, state of Virginia or, Delaware. And, again, because we play in the NJAC, those guys already pretty much know about us if they've been in contact with some of those NJAC schools. But for me, I think the best thing that has been really awesome was, some of my first contacts when I got into the recruiting, I'm gonna shout them out anyway. I'm sorry, but one of the first guys that I reached out to and hit me up back was Coach Bill Tracy up at St. Joe's Metuchen. One of the best coaches that I've ever been around. He's one of the guys that as soon as I send out an email like, hey, can I get your prospect list? Like, how's the season looking? Like, what are you thinking about some of your guys? He's one of the first guys to respond back. And whenever I go to recruit, he's always one of my first stops. And again, because, building those relationships has been really awesome. And he's one of those guys that really opened the door for me to not only get into Middlesex County, but also some of the other counties, like go to Coach Augie and, St. Joe's Regional up there. And then
Bergen County,
the Campanellis, again, those guys, you see all those guys, and, again, they have the Power 4 guys, those massive guys where they got Kirby Smart and Nick Saban coming to see them, right? And so for them to kind of answer my texts and phone calls about players has been really cool. And again, being able to visit them has been really awesome. And, I give credit to a lot of the guys that, they kind of, as soon as they saw that I was a young coach, they're like, all right, so we'll bring you in. We'll teach you how, some of the stuff happens here in New Jersey, and then kind of send you out. And I'll give you, hey, like, Coach Sean Clancy in Notre Dame, he hooked me up with some of the guys. And then, Coach Drob down in, Cherry Hill East, and Coach Lionel and Eastern Regional, like all these guys, they really do a great job of, helping out the younger guys, bringing them up. But also, I mean, when you talk and you go into them and you really talk to them in person, it really helps our guys. And again, when I go there, I'm looking for top guys. I'm looking for guys that are going to be able to contribute. And again, we've had some success, again, talk about Atlantic County with, Holy Spirit. I mean, one of my first recruits I ever got was, Tamir Jones out of Holy Spirit, wide receiver. He's going to be hopefully a contributor this year for us. And then, dipping back into the well with Nick Medina this year, a linebacker from there, hard-nosed kid, physical kid. And, we've had success. And, talk about, Jordan Scipio at Notre Dame. And, one of the biggest, I'm a real big fan of the kid we got coming in this year, Robbie Stigliano out of St. Joe's Regional out of Montvale. And again, stud center. I think he's going to be able to contribute. If not this year, he'll definitely going to be able to contribute in the upcoming years. But he's what we kind of want, a guy that's maybe not 6'4", 6'5". And again, he's playing tough competition. I mean, they played St. Francis this year. They play Bosco, they play Bergen. So guys that really compete at the highest level that might get overlooked by some other schools, those are the guys we want. And going to those schools, meeting those kids, and just telling them about Salisbury. And again, it definitely helps when I recruit New Jersey, because I go in there and say, hey, guys, I'm from Mercer County. I went to Notre Dame. I did the same drive that you guys will do if you guys ever come down and visit, right? So I have the same experiences. I had the kids that when I went to high school, they either wanted to go 15 minutes down the road to Ryder, or they wanted to go all the way out to USC in California. So you get that kind of mixed thing, like kids don't really know what to do, right? So to give them options. And the one thing that we do that, again, I think was a big part of my recruiting process, and same thing I try to keep that up with, when I was getting recruited by Coach Ellis, who was here, he allowed me, and he definitely encouraged, hey, go look at your other schools, go on your other visits. Nowadays, you get some coaches that says, hey, Connor, as soon as we start talking, I don't want you talking to nobody. I don't want you talking to Salisbury, TC. I don't want you talking to nobody, just you and me, right? That's all we're talking to. For me, I was like, this was going to be my biggest decision of my life at the time. I didn't know what I was going to do. I wanted to go out and explore. And, for us, we know what Salisbury has to offer, not only academically, but athletically. You're going to have the resources here to be successful on and off the field. And, again, we want people to go out and explore, because, again, when they come to Salisbury, a lot of times, especially when you're out of state in New Jersey, they come to the school, they shell shocked, like, this is what I can have here. And a lot of times, again, that's really one of the things that puts a kid over the top for us is, they've been to a bunch of different schools. So I always encourage my guys when I recruit, like, hey, you got to visit to so-and-so, go to that school, right? I always say when I come down to, meet a kid in person at their school, usually it's in their cafeteria or in a classroom. When I'm talking to them, I was like, man, if, it's outdated now, but, obviously Nick Saban, I was like, man, if Nick Saban comes through that door and he says, hey, I want to talk to you, he's like, you'd be dumb to not, get your butt up and go talk to Nick Saban, right? So I think for me, knowing that, hey, I know what the resources we have here, I know you're going to have an opportunity to be successful. That's where I try to preach out to those kids. And again, giving them an opportunity to kind of explore. Because again, a lot of these kids, whether they either want to stay 5 minutes from home because they want to be close and they want to be comfortable, or they want to go all the way out in the middle and nowhere. Well, Salisbury's kind of in the middle of that, right? Where you can be far enough away. Mom and dad aren't going to have to knock on your door and wake you up for class, but you can go home. And again, we play in the NJAC, so right in your backyard. Like, I was fortunate enough, my parents were able to come to all my games. Our farthest games were in Rhode Island when we played Western New England my senior year, and I had family up there, so it made it easier. They didn't have to stay in a hotel. They stayed at my aunt's house, and it was a grand old time. But that's one
Coach,
of the nice
when it comes to visits and whatnot, like when you bring guys, so is like, I know it's tough in season, right? Because you just don't have the staffing to help with like a game day visit per se. You know what I mean? In terms of, I'm sure you have handlers for it and whatnot, but Division III is very different when it comes to total staff and just people that can help out the program. And then I know there's some like a limitation when it comes to like official visits, right? Because you're talking about multiple levels here of, when guys hear visit at Salisbury, right? What does that kind of entail? Just let our people know kind of what that is, because I know it's very different from what an official visit is to kind of what a Division III visit is, in terms of, talk mainly off season, not a game day visit where, you're going to come, you're going to watch a game, you're going to talk to coaches. What would an off-season visit with Salisbury football kind of look like?
So for off-season visits, again, if you're getting an invite to visit Salisbury, that's kind of like your unofficial offer, right? If we want you that bad, we want you to come visit. We don't, give out, we don't do 15, 20 visits a year. We don't, bring in, 100, 200 kids to look at the school. We only bring in probably, maybe 100 kids to look at the school. And then from there, they always have their, options to go elsewhere. But again, for us, we come in, We meet them at the parking lot. We bring them into the Purdue School business, because that's always like where we start. That's kind of one of the nicer classrooms that we always start off with. You
Of course.
meet the staff, you watch the highlight tape, you learn about some of the athletic and academic success we've had here. You learn about the resources. And then after that, we go on the tour. And for the last couple of years, I've been fortunate enough to lead the tours, because, again,
Right.
I kind of know my way around. And the one thing being a former
Of course, yeah, you're a huge asset in the fact that you went there, you played, like, you know what I mean? Like, you're still young enough to kind of relate to the kids and whatnot. You're not that old head type of guy, you know what I'm saying? So you're a huge asset. So you take them on the tour, and then from where?
So we go on the tour, and the first two things that especially the moms always ask hey, can my son bring a car on campus so that can they park, and then where are they going to eat? So as an offensive lineman, I'm going to point out, all right, yeah, I know where the park, but also I know where all the good food is. So, it doesn't matter. For the Jersey guys, they didn't know a thing about it, but one of the first places I go to, I talk about Cookout. Cookout's a place where you can get your chicken quesadilla, burger, fries, milkshake, all your goodie stuff.
Love Cookout. Love it.
Yeah, gotta have it.
Yeah,
right?
phenomenal.
Yeah,
Great
and
place.
We go through all the different academic buildings, and the nice thing for us is a lot of the academic buildings we have at Salisbury have some sort of either cafeteria or some little shop that the students, whether they're coming after lift at 6 a.m., they're going to the 8 a.m. class, they can grab a bite to eat. They can grab something so they're always fueled up and ready to go, whether it's before practice, after practice, in between classes. There's always something for them to have, and then going into the library so that they can look at all the resources they have available, whether it's our writing center, our academic commons, which has our math emporium, and then also our Center for Student Achievement, which essentially you can have a tutor if you need to for every class that you take. So you can have an English tutor, a math tutor, a writing tutor. You can have all those options, and again, it's all free for you to use. And then again, it's just showing them where the resources are so that when they get here, it's not foreign. It's not, hey, it's behind some black curtain they have to really go searching for it. It's right out in the open. They can find that thing. And then again, we kind of end some of the tour off with the food. So we go to our commons, which our guys at Dining Commons, they do a great job. Mark from Commons is a big guy on social media, so he loves, putting out all the good stuff that they do. And then we kind of finish up in Mags, which is one of our athletic facilities on campus, where not only it shows the academic success, but the athletic success of all of our athletes. So we have our Hall of Fame, which, Coach Doug Fleetwood is in for baseball, but also for football. And then you have, Coach Rob Despend, who's in there for football. And then you look and see all the athletic awards and accolades from all of our other teams, especially, some of our national championships from a lot of our other teams like lacrosse and baseball, especially since,
right. Excellent
Berkman,
lacrosse program. Lacrosse program.
Coach Berkman, again, that's one of the things that's really nice. You have a lot of guys that have stayed around here, and they've stayed here for a reason. The resources that they have. Coach Berkman definitely didn't get 13 national championships for lacrosse just by being okay, right? So learning from those guys and having those kind of mentors that are around the program definitely help. And again, we finished up at the stadium, and again, it's not that it's a shot on a lot of programs. And again, I kind of fall into it too. Being young, I want to do what a lot of people at other schools do, where they're, they have all the kids dressed up in the full helmet, the cleats and everything. But for us, we show them, the stadium. We show them kind of the suites that some of the parents will rent out. Again, you take a look at our facilities; they're top notch. So our weight room and our head strength conditioning coach, Coach Matt Nine, was the strength coach of the year back in 2019. Across all divisions. So we have the resources, and again, a lot of the kids get kind of hung up on the material stuff of, hey, so how many pairs of cleats am I gonna get? What's the jersey situation gonna be?
You're lucky you get one, buddy. Like
you got to earn your stripes first, and that's kind of the thing that's been really nice about Salisbury is, again, we're gonna allow the kid to make the final decision of if he wants to come here, but we're gonna keep it very open. We're gonna keep an open mind about what we do here. We're gonna be very upfront. Right, we're not gonna kind of beat around the bush. Like when I talked to Coach Flew when I first got here as a recruit, he said, "Hey, you're probably not gonna start as a freshman. Your first action probably might be your junior year." Luckily for me, I was decent enough to be able to play my sophomore year. But again, he set the tone early of, "Hey, you're gonna have to learn our system, but how to work." Right, that's a lot of kids. You win in high school because maybe you have 5 or 6 D1 kids and you don't really know what it takes to win. At Salisbury, we'll teach you how to do that.
I think that's a big thing. That's why it's been so successful over the years, and so it's a great program. It's a great Division III program. It's had a lot of good athletes. We know guys that have gone there and been successful. So
Right.
we're it's been really great having you on and talking more about Salisbury football. You're a young guy. You're nice and ambitious. I love it. And
Passionate, man. Like and look, we like to get like some of the young bucks, right? Like, and we see where it's at and how you're, look, it's, we don't get many young guys, right, Dave, that are like passionate about like the little things, you know what I mean? Like, and to do all that stuff. And look, like, if we could give you some advice, I'm sure Dave would double down on this too. It's like, look, man, just be a sponge, learn everything you can possibly do. Stay broke as long as possible, buddy. I know it sucks, but just stay broke. You know what I mean? And follow in the footsteps of those guys that are willing to help you out along the way. And you know what I mean? And do all of those things while you're young and you still got all that energy and whatnot, and just continue to learn and coach your position to the best of your ability and just keep getting after it day after day. The recruiting stuff, right, Dave, is really usually what we see separate certain guys, right? When you can have the ability to go into buildings and talk to coaches and network and do that stuff, and to bring in some guys that, look, you've already increased it from 5 or 6 Jersey Cats to 12 Jersey Cats, and do it, whether that's directly correlated to you or not, you're still the Jersey Connect for them. So, just do that kind of stuff, man. And it's awesome. Hope, we'll definitely check in down the road and see where you're at, and keep a relationship with us and whatnot. And, we look forward to hearing good things.
Awesome. Sounds good. I mean, this has been awesome. And again, anybody wants to know a little bit about Salisbury, I can probably open the book for them. So it's definitely great.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah. Your social media, just give your social media stuff so that, guys know where to reach you and whatnot and where they can get you at.
So on X, I'm just Connor Lugo. So CONNORLUGO. And there, if they want to get in contact with me, they can message me. Again, the easiest way to get in contact with me is either through Twitter or just filling out the questionnaire that I have in my bio.
It's a great point.
It's an easier way for them. Hey, if I get a kid that's, from Holy Spirit, right? He goes in, he watches this. Hey, I'm going to fill out Coach Lugo's thing. It immediately gets sent to me. I can evaluate him, and then I can contact the coach, say, hey, what do you know about the kid? Hey, we want to invite him for a visit. It'll give me give me everything I need. I'll give him the Twitter, give me his phone number, his email, so he can get invited to any of the prospect camps. We have a prospect camp July 13th this year. So that's
nice.
A good opportunity for our guys to kind of meet the staff, but also kids that come down that don't know about Salisbury, they go on the campus tour before practice, and they come out to the camp, and then they really get to be involved with the staff, meet the guys, get coached up by our guys, and our guys are able to evaluate them, which really helps us because, again, it's different when you see a kid on film, right? Especially
100%.
Junior year, going into the senior year, maybe a little bit bigger, a little faster, a little stronger, right? And maybe they're a little bit more mentally, kind of in the game than some other kids. So being able to touch them, feel them, kind of get a grasp of what they are, and that's definitely really important for us, definitely getting kids out of prospect camp for sure.
No doubt about it. But great having you on, Coach. Best of luck. Best of luck on the recruiting trail, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. Have a good day.
All right. Have a
great day. Take care, bud.
Why is that not?
Young and energetic, man. Good for him.
Absolutely. I don't know why it isn't removing it from the stage, but okay. Is it showing as removed on the stage for you? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see him on there.
Oh, it's so weird. It's showing it's still on stage. Oh, that's so weird. I don't know why my thing shows something different. No, it was really good. Got to talk a little Division III football. Salisbury, really good program.
They do it different though, right? Like, they stand on that old school, like this is what we are, this is who we are, and we're kind of going to go there and whatnot. I think the academics, when it comes to the transfer stuff too, huge part of it. It's hard to get guys in and whatnot when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Their system.
Yeah, their system is really, absolutely. It's a very good system, and and I think that's a big part of it too. So I was gonna say, yeah, no, really good. And then are we back tomorrow?
Friday.
Friday.
Yep, Friday. We're back Friday.
So we'll be back on
busy
Friday.
week.
Back on Friday. I'll give you a call and ask you offline how to go. I looked online, I couldn't find anything, so because it just had your last
13-0 win, brother.
All right. Well, I figured you'd respond fast if it was a win. If it was a loss, you would just say, "All right, I'll talk to you offline."
No. It was really good, man. It was really good. Like, weather played a factor in our favor. So
I saw it was raining, right?
It was like on and off. You know what I mean? You know how it is when it's like that steady drizzle. It almost sucks more so than if you just want to like just rip the downpour and let it happen. But it was like on, off. I don't think a lot of them have ever experienced look, no offense to girls flag, but catching the ball in general is tough. And now to add a wet ball to this whole facet of it,
yeah.
Look, I think we were, we put ourselves in a better spot because I remembered a towel. No offense, I'm not saying pat myself on the back, but I'm like, Coach, it's raining out. What are we doing?
Right.
But no, it was good. It was good. They finished on a high note, Coach, and they were extremely excited to get a shutout. I've never seen
is that their first
that's
shutout?
Their first shutout.
That's cool.
They were all juiced. Look, it might be one of the only times that I heard Bieber on the ride home on the bus. But it's a first for me on the bus ride home. We're listening to Justin Bieber and a lot of Taylor Swift going on. But hey, whatever. Let's just say, Coach, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, hey, in 10 years, where are you going to be? I'm celebrating a 500 season for girls flag. I wouldn't have said I don't think so, but I'll take it, Coach. Got to win somewhere, buddy.
Yep, no doubt. That's cool, dude. That's cool. I love it. That's awesome.
And look, I don't know, those girls were studs, dude. Studs.
Who you mean Nort's girls?
Dude, they had their quarterback could chuck that thing whew, and then they had a really big fast receiver. They had a nice little running back that was quick and could move. Like I said, weather helped us a ton because it was real hard getting the deep ball like they did, and a couple of the we kind of took away some of their trickeration stuff that was a staple within them and whatnot, and our girls just do a real good job of doing their job, and that's it was impressive to say the least. But I'll tell you, dude, Mid-North, dude, wow, I was impressed with those girls and they are put together. Not every one of them was athletic as looked the part. It was, and I give them kudos too because they all had tiger face paint on. They all looked like tigers. I'm I guess the eye black rule doesn't work for a girls flag. So, all right. And the ref was like, "Is that a serious comment?" And I'm like, "Coach," I'm like, "No, dude, I'm not. I could care less if they have tiger face paint on. What is that relevant to what we're doing?" He's like, "All right, I was just checking." I'm like, "Somebody give this guy his check because I don't want him on my sideline." Jesus. But wild.
Oh, that's great.
Mid-South's in the Final Four.
Oh, they are.
So the Final Four, Mid-South plays Pinelands, and then New Egypt is going to play Rumson. So that's the Final Four to actually win the division.
Oh, Neptune's out.
Oh. New Egypt beat RBC.
Is Dell still the coach?
I don't know. They're damn good though.
Very good. Cool, man. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. I'll give you a shout in a little bit.
Yeah, man.
All right, bro. Great job. Great job.
Wild.
That's awesome.
It's wild.
I can't play the outro. What is going on? I'm not able to close the show. It won't let me close anything.
Hang on, maybe I can. Let me see, because if I'm at
Yeah,
sometimes like with me,
you should be able to close. You have admin rights. See if you can close it.
right. Let me. Just all that. That's all. Where we? Okay, I can. Yeah, I got it.
Let me see if it goes.
Yeah, it's outro's playing, or it says it is.
Did it play?